afternoon, Kumar Vikramji.
Good afternoon,
And
sir.
good afternoon to all of you boys and girls,
Good afternoon, sir.
young and not so young, all the
Yes.
listeners, all the participants.
Yes.
It's a great pleasure to be with you all this evening and talk about writing. This is the very first time I'm doing this type of a talk. I've done quite a bit of writing, but not speaking on how to write. And being a medical doctor, I can tell you a little story concerned with doing something for the first time. Once a patient looked very worried and told his doctor that I'm worried because I'm having this surgery for the very first time. So the doctor told him, don't worry, I am also doing this operation for the very first time. So that is what happens when you do things for the very first time, but let's hope we'll have a better luck today. So with that, I can go straight away to the sharing of the screen.
Yes, sir. Please do.
So the title of the session is The What, Why and How of Writing. First, let's start with what. That is what to write on and what type of things to write about. And it can have many angles from which we can look at what to write. Should we write fiction or non-fiction? Writing fiction is more difficult than to write non-fiction. But then some people have the talent and they can come up with the stories very quickly. And if one has to write fiction, should it be a novel? Should it be short stories? Should it be plays? And again, depends upon what you are prepared for. Naturally, a short story will take much less time and it may be something better to start with than to go straight away go to a novel. But then people have started straight away with novels because especially when you're writing from your personal experience, writing a novel is not difficult. Each person's life itself has material for several novels. Writing plays has become a little less popular now. And most of the time it is a novel which then later on may be converted into a film, and then somebody who is specialized in that converts that novel into a script which will be suitable for making a film. Then there are other ways in which one can look at this question, what to write about. Is it real literature or is it just journalism? I'm saying just journalism because it is said that journalism is literature produced in a hurry. So you don't expect that same quality. It's done in a hurry because that is the requirement of the profession. But then interestingly, now there is another category which may be called literature, which is journalism produced in a hurry. What is that? These days this Ukraine war is going on. It's a hot topic. So if somebody does a little bit of research and then comes up with a book on this war, that will be a type of book which will be called literature, which is journalism produced in a hurry. Then, is it technical or popular? If you're technically qualified, then you will have to do some technical writing sometime or the other, and that really can't be called writing. And therefore, for budding writers, it may be more appropriate for me to concentrate on what may be called popular writing, that is writing which is for the general public, which everybody can understand, even if it is on a technical subject. Writing popular science articles, books on popular science is an extremely useful type of activity. It is technical, it is non-fiction, and yet it is extremely useful. Does it have to be a book, or it can be just an article? And these days, articles are often called blogs because that is how you can post them on the internet. So what is it? On this, I can again tell you an interesting anecdote. When I was about 23, it got into my head soon after graduating in medicine that I should write something for the general public because I thought I had a knack for simplifying scientific facts, and therefore I could do something which would educate the public on matters concerning health and disease. And the topic I ended up choosing was nutrition. And then I went to one of my teachers and asked her that this is what I'm intending to do. She said, well, a book may be too early to start with. You can start with a few articles and send them to newspapers. But then, I was hung on this idea of a book because I was very keen on seeing my name on the cover of a book. And so I did write a book, and it did get published by the time I was 27. So that was my first book. Then, whether to write fiction, non-fiction, or a biography. So forget fiction and non-fiction, a biography, which could be also an autobiography. Now here one has to be very careful because in general biographies don't sell well unless it is that of a celebrity. And the same applies also to autobiographies. Leave aside some exceptions which were not written with the intention of being an autobiography, like say the Diary of Anne Frank. That was not her intention, but then they can become classics. In fact, not just popular, but they can become classics. But then one should be very careful. And in fact, it is much easier to write a novel based on a biography, whether it's your own or somebody else's, than to write a real biography, because firstly, you are liberated from the uh, bondage of sticking to facts. In fact, you have to deviate from facts so that there can be no resemblance seen between what you have written and the story of anybody's life. And you can modify details also for another reason, to make it more interesting, to fit into the type of plot that you have in mind. Then you know whether the writing is serious or humorous. Writing serious works is much easier than writing humorous works. But at the same time, injecting a bit of humor even into what is a serious work basically is always useful. Is it prose or is it poetry? Again, poetry is something which is more of an inspired type of a thing. Prose can be done more by deliberation. You can do it willfully. Poetry is more of something inspired, but then for some reasons which are not necessarily the best reasons, poetry is again getting less popular, and in general, publishers are unwilling to publish poetry. But then, depending upon publishers, is also now becoming something of the past, because if somebody really bent on publishing something, you can always publish, at least on the internet, as an ebook without depending upon any publisher. Then, are you writing for adults or are you writing for children? Now, no matter for whom one writes, one has to enter into the reader, and therefore, if you're writing for children, you have to try and be as much of a child as possible. And for that reason, writing for children, especially when you're doing technical writing for children, that is trying to present popular science topics for children, it becomes a little more difficult, but at the same time, it can be done. And if it is done, it is very rewarding. Now, turning to what you are really interested in, how to write. Not just how to write, but what is implied is how to write better. First, a few general things. The most important thing in writing is the idea. And the time when you get the idea is the time when you may not have the time to actually write. And not only that, ideas may come at odd places. They may come when you are on a flight. They may come when you are in the bathroom. They may come when you are taking a morning walk. And therefore, try and have, as far as possible, a writing instrument, that is a pen or a pencil, and a bit of paper with you all the time. Note down the idea and then come back. And these days, I'm sure you will not leave it on those pieces of paper. Transfer it at a place which you can easily search on your computer. So build up an idea file. And when you have time available, then try and decide which is the idea which you would like to start with for writing. And while you have these ideas and have not even started writing on them, there'll be some ideas for which you'll start getting some more ideas about what to write under that, some maybe witty things, some interesting things, something which you read elsewhere and you feel that this is something which I could once again look at when I'm writing on this idea. For that, you can build up, you can have a folder for that idea, and within that, you can create a Word file called jottings. So in that, you just keep putting these things at random, whatever it is, and therefore, when you actually start working on that idea, this jottings file will be very useful. Now, if you look at this jottings file, when you actually start writing, and sometimes even before you start writing, you will find that you have more or less worked out some sort of an outline which you will follow when you actually write. And this outline is not sacrosanct. It may change while you write, but all the same, it is very useful. Then a bit of research. Don't underestimate your reader. Sometimes books written even for children, and when read by children, you'll find the children, your child readers will come up with questions which may not have come up if you've done a bit of research on the topic on which you've written. And therefore, some bit of research may be necessary. And in fact, some of the best of writers do a lot of research when they write. They may not be experts on that subject, but they do so much research that they become experts because they are writing that book. You might have heard of the novelist Arthur Haley. He has a book called Strong Medicine, which deals with the pharmaceutical industry. He has a book called uh, The Final Diagnosis, which deals with medicine. He has a book called Airport, which deals with aircrafts and how the airports function. And he has a book on hotel called Hotel, which deals with how hotels work. And you can see easily that one person could not be all these things. And yet the way he has written, he looks like an expert on the area around which the novel revolves. So research is also sometimes required for even popular writing, even for writing a novel. Well, now you may think that it is time to begin writing. And then the question arises, when exactly to start, which day? Now, when exactly to start? The right time to start is when you are so full up with what you want to write that you just can't hold it. It is spilling over. It's like, the boil is ripe and it just needs a little nick from the surgeon and all the pus oozes out. Of course, pus is dirty. What you'll write will be very nice, but all the same, you understand what I mean. So that is the right time to write. Which day? Don't wait for any auspicious day. Any day can be an auspicious day, and how we can make any day auspicious, that will come towards the end. But at the same time, be prepared that when you actually start writing on a day, you may be staring at a blank page for hours, or a blank computer screen if you're writing straight away on the computer. Or you may write quite a bit, but then you might yourself feel that doesn't really look good. And you may be quite willing, and you should be willing, to trash a whole day's work and start all over again on another day, hopefully more auspicious. Not only a whole day's work may be gone into the dustbin, sometimes a whole manuscript may go into the dustbin, and sometimes even a whole book. And I'll show you that that also happens, and you are quite happy with it. But all the same, the important thing is to begin, and sometimes making a beginning is the most difficult step. Here is how one book went into the dustbin. This first book of mine, which I was talking about, was published in 1974 when I was 27-year-old. It is now out of print, happily out of print. You'll not find it anywhere. Instead of trying to modify it in any way, I wrote another book altogether without trying to see anything that I wrote in 1974. And this is the new book. It is much smaller. Both are on the same subject. Both are for the general public. But then I feel that this new book is much better. And I'm quite happy that the old book has been forgotten by the world. Now, some more details on how to write. Always have an audience in mind. Is it a child? Is it an adult? Is it the general public? Is it technical audience? You write primarily for an audience. Others may read it and find it useful, but still you should have a specific audience in mind and speak the language which is meant for that type of an audience. Secondly, if you're writing on a proper day, an auspicious day, and I'll tell you how you can make any day auspicious, as I said towards the end, you'll find that the ideas will just flow. Don't interrupt that flow. If you're writing in longhand, which people rarely do now, write as fast as you can. Don't worry about your handwriting. If you're writing on the computer, write as fast as you can. Don't bother about a little spelling mistake here and there. And if there is some place where you feel that you need to confirm a fact, don't spend time on confirming that fact. Just write within bracket confirm and make it red. If you're writing on the computer, change the color so that you will not miss that confirm. So that means you'll see it later on. If there's some place where you feel you need to see the dictionary, just write within the bracket dic and move on. If you feel that some place you want to change the word, it's not conveying exactly what you want to say, although it conveying approximately what you to say, just within right bracket thesaurus. So you'll consult the thesaurus later on, but don't interrupt the flow, because that is most important. And you'll find that if you do let that happen, most of the time what you get, we require these little changes because you have to confirm something, you have to consult the dictionary for something, you have to consult the thesaurus for something. But by and large, the first draft itself will be almost the final draft if you don't interrupt the flow. And here is one example of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo is known more as a freedom fighter and as a spiritual master, but he was also a great writer. His collected works now run into 37 volumes, and each volume is 600 to 700 pages. It includes a very wide variety of subjects, prose as well as poetry. Now, around 1907, when he was publishing a magazine called Vande Mataram, that was during the freedom struggle, he was extremely busy. And there was one piece that had to go for that week's magazine, and the magazine was in press, and somebody came to at 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the evening, 10 o'clock at night, sir, please, can you give your piece? Without saying a word, what he did was he tore a scrap of paper from some packing there, wrote something on it in 10 to 15 minutes. He neither eliminated nor added a single word to what he wrote in those 10-15 minutes, did not pause even for a second while he wrote, and the next day, when that piece appeared, the country was on fire. If you understand, everybody was so excited about it. The patriots were jubilant, and the government was frightened. The British government. Now, how to write? Let's continue with that. Have an audience in mind. Don't interrupt the flow, and then do use the dictionary and the thesaurus. They are useful. Dictionary, because sometimes you're not yourself sure of the meaning or the spelling of a word. You have some vague idea that probably this is the word which will fit in here, but actually it doesn't. And if it really doesn't, then the dictionary will give you some synonyms which might fit better. But then sometimes you yourself know that this is not what I want to say. It's only approximately what I want to say. And then a more useful instrument is the thesaurus. And both these now exist in computers. You don't need to necessarily need them in print. And both these exist in the computer. You can see them. And I'll give you some examples of how, the choice of the word can become very important. For example, a simple word like achieve. Is it achieve you want to say, or do you want to say accomplish, secure, obtain, acquire, get, fetch, bring? What is it that you want to say? Now, these are all words which can be used in different ways in different senses. So sense can be different. Now, coming to the style should be natural. That is the way you would speak. Naturally, if it is not just a dialogue that you are writing, then some degree of formality will come in, but as natural to the way you would speak as possible. And it should be engaging. Engaging both in the beginning and as it goes on. In the beginning, capture the attention. Capture the attention with a good title and a good opening sentence. And then sustain the attention by keeping the reader engaged throughout. And don't copy anybody else's style. That is most important. A student of Sri Aurobindo, Raja Ram Patkar, when he asked him, should I follow Macaulay's style because I like his writing very much? Sri Aurobindo said, don't be Macaulay's slave, but be your own master. You'll never be like him, but only a faint echo of Macaulay. So if you try to copy him, you will end up being only a faint echo of him, a pale copy of him. You will never be Macaulay himself. Think for yourself, be a master of your own style. So be yourself and write the way comes with what comes naturally to you. Then the choice between simple words and difficult words. In general, do not use a difficult word if a simple one will serve the same purpose. Common versus uncommon words. Don't use an uncommon word if a common word will serve the same purpose. Then use of idioms and proverbs. You can use occasionally, but don't overdo them. Sometimes, especially early writers have a tendency to use too many of them because in school, they're appreciated. But then a student writing in an exam is different from someone writing for the general public. Literature is not the same as an answer sheet. So don't overuse idioms and proverbs. And ornamental language, of course, is always a strict no-no. Euphonic words and elegant variation. Now, these things are, in fact, good. Now, what is euphonic words? Euphonic words means words which produce a similar sound. For example, if you want to say something like clear, crisp, and concise. Now, all these three things, clear, crisp, and concise, it may be possible to say in some different words also, but these words have been chosen because they convey actually what I want to say. At the same time, they sound good because they're all starting with a k. Clear, crisp, and concise. So instead of concise, I will not say brief. But on the other hand, sometimes I will use brief instead of concise. For example, if I had to say that beauty and brevity don't always go together. If you are very brief, then the language is sometimes not beautiful. It becomes too terse. So beauty and what did I say? Beauty and brevity don't go together. And the extent to which you use one or the other, or sacrifice one in the interest of the other, is a choice that the writer always has to make. Now, here, I didn't say concise. I used brevity and beauty because both start with a B. So this is using euphonic words. That is okay. Elegant variation. What is that? Sometimes, you want to say the same thing again and again, but you feel repeating the same word again and again will not look good. And just for that, you use another word which conveys the same thing, which is also a simple word, a common word, but at the same time, it is different. So that is elegant variation. Sometimes using an uncommon word, but a simple word is also okay. For example, to say it is good, good, good doesn't look good. But instead of good, you use a more precise word, that is in what way it is good. You can use another word which may be almost equally common but more specific for it. Because otherwise, this food is good, this language is good, this book is good. For everything, you can't keep saying good. So try and think, what is it that will describe the good quality of the book that you're talking about? And use a simple common word for that, rather than just using that. So that is another thing which you have to keep in mind. So euphony is okay, elegant variation is okay, trying to use an uncommon simple word is okay, but no ornamental language. Quotations. That is what somebody else has said. Now here there are a few things to keep in mind. You should use a quotation if somebody has said something in a way that appeals to you and you think it will appeal to the readers. But then again, don't use too many quotations, because if you fill your writing with too many quotations, it looks as if you are thinking with somebody else's head all the time, not with your own head. That is one. The second thing is, when you use a quotation, it should be because it fits in very well. And it may sometimes need connecting links, which means it comes after what you have said, fits in exactly there, and from there should follow what you say immediately after the quotation. So the quotation should gel and become a sort of an integral part of what you're writing. It should harmonize with what you're writing. It is not just an add-on because it is a very witty sentence. Then humor. A bit of humor in everything is good, but then even in serious writing. But then again, it should not be overdone. And even more important, there are certain types of jokes which are good and certain types of jokes which are not good. What are the type of jokes which one should avoid? One is humor which is aimed at a particular person. Don't criticize anybody, even if you do it in a humorous way. Secondly, jokes which are at a particular group of people, that is a community, a particular community. Those jokes are a strict no-no. And thirdly, jokes which are inappropriate for the occasion or for the type of writing that you are doing, because every writing is not amenable or suitable for all types of jokes. Just as all occasions are not suitable for jokes. For example, you don't crack a joke when you go for a funeral. So one has to keep the appropriateness in mind. Then one can modify a joke which you have picked up from somewhere to suit local conditions. For example, if you read something about what Jackson did in the United States, you can convert it to Mr. Jaikishan when you're writing in India. So you can modify to suit the local environment. And what are the best jokes? The best jokes that you are those which are at the expense of yourself. So that is safest as well as the best joke to crack. Both in writing and even otherwise in life. If somebody tells you that you are a fool, just a fool, I'm an idiot, gadha hu bilkul, that is acceptable. Now, another very beautiful sort of piece of advice from Sri Aurobindo, recollected by another one of his students. Every sentence should logically follow from the preceding sentence, and similarly, every para should logically follow from the preceding one. Because you see, in your mind, all these links are clear. But then you have to step into the shoes of the reader. Will it be equally clear to the reader? Will these links be clear to the reader? That is what is important. And that's why it is important that you try to think of it when you're writing. And that is also the reason why it is very important to do some rewriting, which means you read what you've written and then keep editing it. Rewriting doesn't necessarily mean that you write the whole thing all over again, but you keep editing it, keep modifying it. This modification required will be less, as I said, if you are doing some inspired piece of writing on an auspicious day on which the first draft itself is almost the final draft. But all the same, some bit of rewriting is required by all types of writing. And in fact, that is the essence of good writing. And therefore, don't hesitate in doing that rewriting. As it is said, easy writing makes hard reading, and easy reading is the result of hard writing. If you try to make your writing very easy, writing it once and then just sending it somewhere for publication, that will not read well. That is, person will find it very difficult to make out what you have written. It will be hard reading. On the other hand, something which, when you read, feels like silk, smooth as silk, that is the result of repeated editing. Somebody has worked on it. So the essence of good writing is rewriting. Now, some tips about rewriting. Don't start rewriting immediately after you finish the manuscript. Have a cooling period. So if a book has 5 chapters, go on writing all the chapters in a state of flow and then go to chapter 1 again. So by then the chapter 1 might have been written a few months ago. There has been a cooling period. Because now you'll see your thesis much better. If you read it immediately after writing, you'll feel it looks perfect. There's nothing more to be done. So allow a cooling period. Secondly, put yourself in the reader's place. As I said, when emphasizing that repeatedly, so think from the reader's point of view. If so, keeping that in mind, if there are any gaps in the flow of thought, if there are any questions that may arise from your narrative, think of those questions and answer them before the reader has asked, because the reader may not have an opportunity to ask you those questions. You're not speaking in front of the person. You're speaking to the person through the book or through the manuscript, but you're not speaking directly to the person. So you have to anticipate also the questions that may arise in his mind. Then, while rewriting, you have to see whether what you've written is clear enough, precise enough that you use the right words at the right place, and they cannot be interpreted in 2 ways. There's no ambiguity. The one simple thing which produces ambiguity, particularly when Indians write in English, is that they use pronouns a little too often, because that is how we use in Indian languages. But then in English, if you use a pronoun, if it is used inappropriately and too often, sometimes you can't make out for which noun this pronoun stands. And therefore, it's sometimes required that you repeat the noun. And therefore, try and think, can this pronoun apply to 2 things? Then another word which we use very wrongly sometimes is only. Now, only can mean 2 different things in you just by change of a little place. For example, if there's a wash basin and that is the place where you want people to rinse their mouth. In a dining hall, you have a wash basin and you want people to rinse their mouth at the wash basin and not just anywhere else. So what will you write? You'll write, please rinse your mouth only in the wash basin. That will be correct. Or please rinse your mouth only in the wash basin. But suppose you say, use only the wash basin. So use the wash basin only for rinsing your mouth. Now this will mean a different thing altogether. Use the wash basin only for rinsing your mouth will mean that don't use it for washing your hands. Whereas if you say use the wash basin only the wash basin for rinsing your mouth, that will mean that use the wash basin for rinsing the mouth no other place. So just shifting the word only by one place can make all the difference in what it will mean. Now, one question is, if rewriting is so important, how many times should one rewrite? There's no hard and fast rule. But the more experienced you get, the less will be the number of times you will need. But then I've heard figures like 20 also being said, you should rewrite it 20 times. Not only that, especially for early writers, you can improve your own writing only up to a point. Beyond that, you need an editor. And one thing which one of my teachers used to say to illustrate that was that you can shave your own skull only up to a point. Beyond that, you need a barber. So that just as you need so the editor does the barber's job in a way. I hope no editor is listening. But then after I've done all the rewriting, it is time to let go. It is time to let go, which means that you can't just keep rewriting, and just because every time you go over it again, you feel like making some changes, then you'll never be able to let it go. So you also have to know that there comes a time when you have to let it go, and either it is good enough as it is, or maybe the editor will improve it further. Now I'll come to something which I kept saying I'll tell you towards the end. And that is how you can make any day auspicious, how you can get that flow, how your first draft can become almost the last draft. Start writing with a prayer. And finish also writing with a prayer. You don't have to think of God only when you need his help. You have to thank him also for helping you. Huh? Now, what are the main things to pray about? One is gratitude. Why gratitude? Because the talent that we have, the special gift that we have, that we are able to write, not everybody is able to do equally good in that way. And everybody has different types of talents. But whatever talent we have, that has been given to us. Not only the talent has been given to us, the idea has been given to us. The opportunity that we can make use of that talent and whatever else education and learning and training, like these master classes that has been added to it, that has also been given to us. And for all that, we should be grateful. Second is the motive, and that we'll come to when we come to the next item, that is why write at all. The motive behind writing. So the motive also makes a difference to how much that prayer will be heard. And the result will be the day will become auspicious and you'll get that flow. And when you finish writing, again end with a prayer. And main thing is gratitude. In fact, gratitude is or thank you is the shortest and simplest prayer, and in a way, the best and a complete prayer in itself. Now we come to why write at all. Before we go to why we write at all, let's see why we should not write. If you think that you want to write because you want to grow rich and famous, you are more likely to be disappointed rather than your wishes being fulfilled. Because when it comes to earning money, the writing profession is probably one of the lowest paid in the world. If you look at the number of rupees you earn per hour spent, writing is one of the, if not the lowest paid, one of the least paid professions in the world. And again, when it comes to becoming famous, some people do grow famous through writing, but that is not because they wrote because they wanted to grow famous. It is more incidental and a byproduct. Sometimes even they did not expect that they'll grow so famous because of writing. It's said that if you want to be really known after dying, that is, if you are really famous, one would be known even after dying. If you want to be known after dying, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing about. The later is easier. Everybody can do something worth writing about, because we all have some sort of talent or the other, and if we use it to put it to a noble use, you will end up doing something which will be worth writing about, and that may make you famous. I'm not saying that that is why you should do those good things, which will make you famous. But what I'm saying is that to expect to grow famous through writing is just as silly as to expect that one will grow rich by writing. So you neither grow rich nor famous by writing if you write with that intention. Okay, I'll not write to become rich and famous, but I want to produce a classic. Again, classic, means which will be read after a long time. Like Shakespeare is being read even after 400 years. But again, Shakespeare didn't write with the idea that he'll be read after 400 years. Or to win a prize. Again, you may win a prize, but then that's only a byproduct. That is incidental. The real prize comes from within. The joy that you get of writing. If you're satisfied with that prize, that is okay. And you'll be satisfied with that if you follow some of the things which we'll be talking about soon, why to write at all. When it comes to a classic, that may give you a hint of what type of writing is the one that is likely to also turn into a classic. Which are the oldest books in the world today, which continue to be read? You'll find invariably they're all either religious books, spiritual books, or mythology. Related, teacher, religion, mythology, spirituality, related subjects. These are the books that some of them are being read even more than 5,000 years after they were written. And who are the most famous people in history? Some of them are so old in history that one is doubtful that they actually even existed as human beings. Rama, Krishna, Jesus Christ, Muhammad. These are the people who have been famous for more than a few thousand years. And so if that is what makes you famous, and the books which such people have produced are the ones become classics, that gives you a hint to what is it that can approach to becoming a classic and what is it that leads us becoming famous. Okay. Again, a few other reasons which may be more modest but still should not be the primary motives for writing: to see one's name in print. As I confessed, when I was writing my first book, I also was very excited about it because I wanted to see my name on the cover of a book. But that type of modest desire at a certain stage in life may be acceptable. To make a living, that again, as I said, may be unreasonable. Not only one will not grow rich, but one can't even easily make a living from writing unless one takes to journalism. Now let's come to why to write. Now these are very trendy expressions for self-expression, to ventilate. For self-expression, I want to give expression to what is within me. I want to ventilate. I'm feeling very stressed, so let me just get everything out by putting it down on paper. These are very valid reasons for writing, but that is not really creating literature. That creates a diary. You might as well write a diary. You don't have to create literature for that purpose. And just because you are giving expression to what is within you or ventilating your stress doesn't necessarily mean that people will feel like reading it. And unless people read it, then you don't have to write it in the form of literature. It's just a diary. So, some really valid reasons to write. If you have something new to say, which means something which nobody has ever said earlier, very difficult to find. Almost anything under the sun, somebody else has already said. Or if you think you will say something in a way that is different from the way it has been said earlier, and that your way of saying it is better. Because being different can be worse or better or just different. It should be not only different from the way it has been said, but it is also better. In fact, it should be much better, and that is what justifies it. If you think that what you will say is something that people need, that's also another important thing. It's not just you will say it in a better way, but then people should need it. If you think that what you'll say will do some good to the people, that is even better. And if you think people would like to read what you say and the way you say it. So these are all questions. If you answer in yes, then your motives for writing are much better than otherwise. And to put it very briefly, what you write should be uplifting for you and for the readers, and the two go together. So when you write something which is uplifting in nature, you also get uplifted because there's always scope for getting better than we already are. So even if it doesn't do good to anybody else, even if in the sense that others may not read it, even if you don't get many readers, at least you have been able to uplift yourself. That is guaranteed 100%. Now, this comes from a spiritual master, the mother, who was the spiritual collaborator of Sri Aurobindo. And this is what we will end with. This says what I have been saying in a more elaborate and direct form. The more one expends usefully, the more one makes oneself capable of receiving. Expends what? What we have. We can give only what we have. So if you spend what you have, be it money or be it knowledge or be it your ability to write, if you spend it, you receive more of it. You receive from where? From the only one source from which everything ultimately is received, and that is God or the divine. So the more one expends usefully, the more one makes oneself capable of receiving. If we develop ourselves mentally, if we put our brains to work, if we make others benefit from the fruit, that is fruit of making our brains work better. We make ourselves capable of receiving a greater quantity of even deeper and purer intellectual forces. So you receive more, the more you spend, and when you use it for the benefit of others. And then she goes on to say, some people are more capable than others of entering into relation with this field of ideas. So writers, speakers, they are all people who can enter the field of ideas. But this is nothing other than an additional responsibility for them. Just as having more money than you need is a responsibility because you should be willing to give away in charity. In the same way, having a special ability to enter this field of ideas is also a responsibility. You have to share that also, just as a person with extra money has to share it. But that is nothing other than an additional responsibility for them. Since they are in possession of this wealth, intellectual wealth is also wealth. Since they are in possession of this wealth, they are its stewards and must see that it is used for the good of the greatest number. So it's not only that you are doing it because you're a nice person, it is a responsibility. It is a responsibility that God has given us. God has entrusted us with this, that if I give this person this special ability to write, she will use it properly, she'll put it to good use, she'll use it for the good of the greatest number of people. Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch is the place where I live and work, and you're all welcome here. And if you have any comments or questions on what I have spoken, or you want to get online magazines from Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch, which are completely free, you just have to send an email to me. My email address is rambigework@gmail.com, RAM for Ramesh, BIJ for Bijlani, and work to indicate that I hardly work. So rambigework@gmail.com. And my gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for this opportunity, which made me fulfill the purpose of my life, and the love and blessings of both the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. As expected, it was the most enlightening talk that we had. And
Stop sharing.
Professor Bijlani, has been associated with National Book Trust India much before any of us who are working at National Book Trust India. He has been associated right from 1980s. He is author of many books, and he is not only an inspirational speaker or a spiritualist or humanist. Basically, he's a medical scientist and retired professor of physiology from AIMS, and he has specialized in physiology, nutrition, yoga, and we have now question answer session. Professor Bijlani sir, there will be questions. There are questions already in the chat box, and our PRO, Ms. Snehata, she would be moderating it. She would be reading out the questions for you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vikram sir. Thank you so much, Ramesh sir, for the wonderful lecture session. And I'm sure now writing will be more easier for our YUVA authors after this lecture. And everyone liked your lecture session. Everyone liked your presentation. So one of our YUVA author, Akshat Dev, is asking, could we please get the presentation doc in our group for future reference, sir?
Sure. The PowerPoint presentation is with you. I have emailed it. You may share it with all the participants.
Thank you so much. So next question is by Kapil Mewada. Sir, as you said that you started publishing since you were 27, how do we see the change in writing, publishing, marketing, and choices of readers during your journey of writing till now? Like now, publishers put their money and effort on well-known and famous authors, and readers also read established writers more than new ones. Your point, sir.
Yes, publishing has become more difficult, and partly because everything is commercialized, partly because the people are reading less of books. They're reading more on the internet. They're reading more of short stuff. I mean, sometimes you find that even when people send a WhatsApp message which has 4 sentences, they break it into three messages. They can't even type 4 sentences at a stretch and then send the message. So that is the type of attention span and type of way we are communicating these days. And therefore, naturally, reading of books has gone down, perhaps. But all the same, as I said, in some ways it has become more difficult. In some ways it has become easier because anybody can put anything on the internet and see the satisfaction of having a book on the net, being read by some people, especially younger people who are the one who are more important. They are the future. They will be reading it. And also there are publishers who do charge some money, but then they'll publish whatever you want and provide even a single copy in print if it is asked for.
Okay, sir. So next one is from Alia. Good evening, sir. My question is, which style is best to portray indigenous habits and expressions in an easy to understand manner? Since the audience is from probably a different state and different culture, how can I represent the beauty of the native area without overwhelming or confusing the reader?
As far as possible, our inspiration should come from our own environment, our own background, because that is when we are most natural. And that is why also the language in which we write, unless when there's a special reason, we write best in our own language. Uh, Unfortunately, our system of education has been such that we have not been able to master English sufficiently well. And uh, along with that, we have not been able to master our own languages well either. Uh, so we are neither here nor there. And yet, because of the prestige that English has been enjoying, it is more prestigious to write in English, which we can't write properly. And when it comes to our own languages, we have not learned them well because we have not given enough importance to them. So that is what creates some of the difficulties, but I think we have to change and have greater, develop a sense of pride in our own language, in our own culture, in our own surroundings. And that is because language and culture to some extent go together. What is within your culture is best expressed in our own language. And I've seen this, although I mean, my own Hindi is not very good, but at the same time, I found that whenever I write a book, children's book, particularly in English, and then I start translating it into Hindi, I find that the Hindi translation comes out much better and is able to convey much more easily what I'm actually trying to say. For example, one of the recent books, which the National Book Trust published, in which there's a child who's getting on the nerves of her mother. And uh, in the English book, it never occurred to me how to express it. But then when I was translating it, it suddenly came to me quickly. हे भगवान उसकी माँ बड़ी परेशान हे भगवान ये लड़की है या तूफान. Now this type of rhythmic expression which conveys exactly I want to say came in Hindi easily. It was nothing equivalent was there in the original English version. उसकी माँ बड़ी परेशान हे भगवान ये लड़की है कि तूफान. Now if you can't translate it in English, is she a girl or a storm? Huh? You won't say that. There was another one, again published by the National Book Trust, the Kavya story. A child has fever and her mother has stayed awake the whole night taking care of her. And in the morning, the child tells her mother, you must be very tired, you haven't slept the whole night. And in the English version, the mother says something like this, well, I'm not tired, I can do anything for you. When I started translating into Hindi, I wrote, अरे पगली कैसे बातें कर रही है? मैं तेरे लिए कुछ भी कर सकती हूँ. Now, pagli, when she said, I said that didn't come to me naturally when I was writing in English. So, there are certain things which bring out what is within us much more clearly in our own language. And I mean, Rabindranath Tagore, he got the Nobel Prize not for what he wrote in English. He written Gitanjali in Bangla. That is what he got the Nobel Prize for.
Okay, so very well explained. Thank you, sir. And next question is from Akshat Dev. Could you please direct us to any guides and resources that will help us further practice and learn good writing? Any book, any resources, sir? Any guides?
Well, I mean, again, the internet is a very rich resource for that. I won't say that I never read any book on writing. I did read a few years back one book on writing, but then I don't remember the name and I gave it away to somebody who was conducting a workshop on writing. So I don't have that book. But I'm sure there will be plenty of books available on how to write.
Okay. So next question is from Kainat. Very interesting question, that what feelings do you go through when rereading your old works? What advice would you have given yourself for your book debut now that you are an established author?
Yes, when you read your own writing after a few years, you get surprised. Could I have written it? Because I said, I mean, you are in that special state of flow. You are receiving, as if from some higher source, and you are only serving as a channel for communicating it on paper or on the computer. So it is in that state that you do your writing, and that applied to that piece of writing only at that point. So when you read it yourself, you find it's very good, but could I really write it?
थैंक यू सर मीनवाइल मैं आप सभी से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी कि अटेंडेंस लिंक पे जाकर अपना अटेंडेंस भी लगाते रहें नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज फ्रॉम मोनिका राणा सर इट हैज बीन अ डिलाइटफुल सेशन सर थैंक यू सो मच फॉर ब्लेंडिंग द प्रोफेंडिटी ऑफ राइटिंग विद ह्यूमर it was very rejuvenating to hear your talk. So she's basically saying thanks to you. And Jay Simha, next, he is asking that everything you said was practical and pertinent. It was clear and concise. Okay. So next question is, I think that's all we have. अगर इस क्लास को हम okay. I have a question that how to, okay, one more question is from Vikas Dhengia. I have a question that how to avoid the conflict that happening in my head after analyzing the data and studying the resources. Cause of that, I am facing problems with connecting myself with the main character.
You have to cut through the trivia and the unnecessary details. Then you'll find that you'll again be able to uh, get where you really want to. Because when you're collecting data or doing any piece of research, naturally you will collect a lot which is not really necessary. It helps in creating a background, but that is the part of the game. I mean, you should know much more than what you have to write or speak, and you should do research which generates a lot of data, which is much more than you will actually use. So how to cut through it and get to the core that you really want is the other thing, and that comes partly from that skill, partly also from introspection.
Okay,
Which means
next
that what
question.
you read has to be digested. What you learned has to be digested, and then you will get to that core.
Okay, sir. Now the next question is from Aarti. My question is on how to recognize your own unconscious biases and how to prevent them from interfering with the authenticity of the story.
It's a very good question, almost impossible to avoid because we all have some biases, some unconscious things which are there in the subconscious, and they are there because our knowledge is incomplete. None of us has the whole truth, and any partial truth is sure to be biased. For example, some of you now today know me as a writer, but there is a lot that you do not know about me, and therefore you have a certain type of bias. When you know more about me, uh, in some ways your impression could improve, in some ways it could also get much worse, which means that it gets balanced. So to get to a more and more balanced view, you have to know more and more. And since none of us knows everything, we all have a certain degree of bias. So that's impossible to avoid. But then the way out perhaps is that to not be too dogmatic, not be preachy, not sermonize, and leave scope for the reader to judge for herself, and don't claim to be the last word. And also do not be afraid of being inconsistent. Suppose you wrote something once and then you are writing the same thing after 10 years. Don't worry if you are not writing exactly what you wrote 10 years earlier, because over these 10 years you have evolved, and therefore you may now think differently. For example, I showed you two books 38 years apart on the same subject. And the first one was Eating Scientifically. The second one, the title itself was changed, Eating Wisely and Well. Now, what is the difference between scientific and wisely and well? Scientifically only means what you eat and how much you eat, according to modern science. Wisely and well means what you eat, how much you eat, and the attitude with which you eat. That is, what you eat, how much you eat, and how you eat. Just as I said, how you write, uh, with what attitude you write. So, with what attitude you eat. And not only according to modern science, the second book also has a bit of Ayurveda. I blended it with Ayurveda. So, blending modern science with Ayurveda and bringing in the importance of the attitude with which we eat, the prayerful attitude, the mindful attitude with which we eat, that makes it not just scientific, it makes it eating wisely and well.
So all the questions are over now, sir. Thank you so much for explaining each and every question so wonderfully. And we have shared the attendance link once again. Kindly do mark your attendance. And that's all from question and answer session. Kumar Vikram, sir, over to you, please.
Thanks a lot. I'm sure this masterclass was quite refreshing and of a different nature, because our previous masterclasses have focused on the core ideas of how to blend history, how to research the archives, the documentaries. But this is one class which I'm sure, because going by the response received, everybody has liked it. And while they are in the midst of the writing, I'm sure this would have come as a useful as a useful class for all of them. So thanks a lot, sir, Professor Bijlani, for finding time for us. And I hope we will find more opportunities for some interaction with our UVA authors to you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.